Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers, because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button, and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD, and working on a product to help people overcome these problems, because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions.
Common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast. I have 3 guests today: Tom Cosgrove, Aidan Sharon, and Michael Karapetian. They're all part of website earthday.org. Tom is the Chief Creative and Content Officer. Aidan is the Director of End Plastic Initiatives. And Michael is the Great Global Cleanup Coordinator. So we're going to talk about their work and their roles. So thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much. Excellent. Well, if you don't mind, maybe Tom, if you can go first, give a little bit of background on yourself, and then we'll go to Aidan and then Michael.
Sure. Yeah, I'm the Chief Creative and Content Officer at earthday.org, and earthday.org is the organization that sprang out of the original Earth Day back in 1970, and our chairman emeritus and former chairman of earthday.org, Dennis Hayes, was the original organizer along with Senator Gaylord Nelson back in 1970, and so we have continued that work year in and year out, both on Earth Day and all year round. And this year, our theme for Earth Day, we have a theme every year, is Planet versus Plastics. And it's really focusing on the plastics issue, both from I think most people are aware that there's a pollution issue with plastics and it's too many. What I think fewer people are understanding, but research is really emerging quickly, is that there's a real growing health crisis related to plastics. And about that, and that's really a lot of the work we're doing this year is really trying to educate people on the fact that plastics are a fossil fuel product, plastics are oil. And with that come a lot of issues, both in terms of climate, but as well as health issues. And so that's a big focus of what we're looking at across all the programs.
Okay. And Aidan, what's your background like, and what's your intro?
Yeah, so I'm Aidan Sharon. I'm the Director of End Plastic Initiatives. I studied biology at University of North Carolina, Wilmington. I grew up along the beach, saw a lot firsthand around the plastic pollution issue. I joined Earth Day originally as the Canopy Project Coordinator and the End Plastics Manager. And then we started seeing more and more information coming out around plastic. Like Tom said, the health issues around plastic. And so I've just been engaging more and more. And then right before I started, the UN Environmental Assembly declared that they're going to try to do a global plastics treaty to help with the plastic crisis. So that's kind of been my full-time work for the past year or so, to focus on the national and international policies around plastic. Any treaties that they're going through are actually legally binding. They're going to have some teeth to them, unlike some other international treaties that we've seen. That's kind of where I'm coming from. Right before starting at Earth Day, I was a teacher, and before that, I worked in wetland reclamation on the coast of North Carolina.
Okay. And last, Michael?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on. Michael Karapetian. I run the Great Global Cleanup at earthday.org, and our goal is to rid the environment of waste and plastic pollution for good. And we try to connect every corner of the cleanup movement, and there's people doing cleanup all over the world. And we try to connect them and really get them part of the movement to help them see that it's not just cleaning up your local park and that's it, but it's kind of part of this global movement, and to see that's connected to something much more. And what's really great about cleanups is that, for some reason, the environmental movement seems to polarize a lot of people, especially in the United States. But what's great about cleanups is that no matter what your background is, what you think, it's like you can see trash and in your environment, in your local park, in the river, and realize that it's not really quite supposed to be there. And a lot of people, love getting involved in the environmental movement through doing cleanup. And, it's a huge help, especially now that we're focusing on, plastic, like cleanups is a huge part to get people involved and get them to see how devastating it really is, but also give them a way that they can get involved and make a real change in their community and in the world.
Okay, excellent. Well, maybe we can start with cleanups. How are they typically organized and where? Is it a beach? Is it a park? Like who decides and how are these things orchestrated?
Yeah, great question. So they're honestly anywhere that trash is, if you're on the coast, typically it's going to be at the beach. We have organizations all across the country and all across the world who are part of our network that do cleanup. And what's really great is that once you get connected with these organizations, you can go out to these beaches, to these locations, and a lot of organizations do them every month, do them every weekend, but a lot of them typically do them around Earth Day or World Cleanup Day in September. And luckily, we have a tool where if you go to earthday.org/cleanup, we have a map right there, and you can find cleanups that are happening near you. And as we get closer to Earth Day, that map is going to be filled up.
Do the cleanups have a significant effect, or like what have you seen makes a successful one versus one that fails?
Yeah, so that's kind of the issue that a lot of people run into, is that you have these amazing groups that go out and remove thousands of pounds of waste out of the river. And then a month later, the same amount of trash is there. And it's kind of like a never-ending tap, really. But what we're really focusing on is how do we turn these cleanups where people are just going picking up trash and it's the same thing year after year, same amount of trash, or sometimes even more. How do we turn it into something more than that? And we've been working with a lot of partners, and we're trying to build this program now to create plastic and trash audit in our cleanups so that, our partners can go out and essentially create evidence of the trash that they're picking up and what brands are polluting the most. So that's one way we're trying to, make it more successful. And there's a lot of organizations out there that already do this. But I count it a win anytime someone who isn't really part of the environmental movement take that initiative and that agency to go out in there.
So are there places where the cleanup stays, or pretty much everywhere it's done, like you said, a month later, all the trash is back?
Yeah, it does vary per location and per ecosystem, right? And, a lot of rivers, like there's a lot of cleanups on rivers. We remove lots of trash out of rivers and we go dispose of it properly, whether it's, through recycling channels, and most of it ends up at the landfill. But, if we're not focusing on those upstream solutions that, Aidan does a really great job of, his guy knows everything about these upstream solutions. If we're not focusing on that, then the trash is just going to keep showing up on the rivers, on the beaches. On top of the upstream solutions, it comes down to, behavior change downstream. Know not to litter or where to dispose waste, to stop using these plastic products.
Yeah, well, let's go to Aidan for a second. So it seems like, you guys have direct evidence that the cleanups only do so much. You got to go upstream. So what are some of the initiatives upstream that you guys have worked on that have actually had an impact?
So one of our main focuses is the Global Plastics Treaty that I mentioned earlier. It's not official yet. It's supposed to be signed at the end of this year, but we're going to the next set of meetings and will occur around Earth Day in Ottawa, Canada. And one of our main goals there was to get health mentioned inside of the Global Plastic Treaty in a more, accountable, reasonable way. Originally, health was mentioned only a couple times, but after going through a few of the meetings, kind of working with delegates of different countries, other organizations, kind of made health one of the larger parts of that treaty. Outside of the international field, we're pushing for the Bravery from Plastic Act in the United States to go through. It was first introduced 2021. It was reintroduced 2023. So we're working with groups of senators, other government offices to make sure that those upstream solutions are really thought about and really implemented throughout the country and internationally. What we don't want to see is these meetings be overrun by the petrochemical industry and petrochemical industry lobbyists, people that are pushing for oil to be inside of the conversation more. So something else that we've been focused on is making sure that the environmental world and the people at large are heard in a louder voice than those that are just working for big oil.
Okay. So is it the production of these plastics is the main problem, or is it consumers are just, it's so accessible to consumers that they just use the products and throw them wherever they are? Like when you poke at both, an industry and an individual consumer behavior, like what is the pushback like from both?
So we don't want to blame the consumers for it. Like it's the most convenient. Plastic is one of the most convenient things out there, but the issue is we have other solutions for it. So what we need to target is the production side. From every step of the plastic formation, it is harmful to the earth. So starting from when it's oil and they're pulling out of the ground, you're having emissions there, you're tearing up the ground. Areas that are near these production sites have higher rates of cancer, higher rates of neurological disorders. And then we go down the line to when plastic is disposed. And you've seen, and everybody around the world has seen, that recycling as effective as we were originally told. In the United States, we only recycle 9%, or some stats say 5% of our plastic waste. So we really need to target those upstream, start reducing production. That's why one of our main key points is a 60% reduction in production by 2040. It may not seem a lot, and some others are kind of focused on going a little bit further, but we think that's a more palatable way. And once we target the single-use plastics alone, that accounts for 50% of plastics that are produced. So single-use plastics are ones that you use one time. So that Pepsi bottle that may be sitting on your counter, or your Coca-Cola bottle that may be sitting on your counter, you can use it one time, and either recycle or throw it away, and it can never be used again. So what we want to focus on is not blaming the consumer, but rather putting all the blame on the production and the producers of the plastic.
Before we continue, I've been personally funding the Finding Genius podcast for 4.5 years now, which has led to 2,700 plus interviews of clinicians, researchers, scientists, CEOs, and other amazing people who are working to advance science and improve our lives and our world. Even though this podcast gets 100,000 plus downloads a month, we need your help to reach hundreds of thousands more worldwide. Please visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click on Support Us. We have 3 levels of membership from $10 to $49 a month, including perks such as the ability to see ahead in our interview calendar and ask questions of upcoming guests, transcripts of podcasts you're interested in, the ability to request specific topics or guests, and more. Visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click Support Us today. Now back to the show.
What about a subsidy? You know, if I'm Pepsi and I produce all these bottles, what if you subsidize me or give me some kind of a break, tax break, whatever it may be, if I use, if I reuse the plastic? If I go and I contract with the landfills and I try to get back enough to make it feedstock again, I don't know if it's even viable, but is there a way to do that, to incentivize them instead of just hit them with a stick?
So one of the issues we're seeing is that even once you recycle that plastic, you can't necessarily use it more than once, or even if you can use it more than once, after it's been recycled, it can't be used for food. So it's no longer food grade safe. So them coming out and saying, hey, we just take these plastics and make them into new materials, it's kind of disingenuous because they're not making it into new bottles. They're just making it into something else that just gets discarded immediately again. So it's just kind of delaying the inevitable just a little bit further. And these companies make so much money already. I just don't see the incentive for governments to kind of give them more money on top of what we're already handing over.
And I just to add to that, Richard, I think, most people have probably turned over a bottle or a piece of plastic or a packaging or whatnot and seen those, the little recyclable symbol and the numbers in there. And those numbers, the resin identification codes, go from 1 to 7, and they're different types of plastic. And it's meant to be sort of a means to describe the types of plastic and how they can be recycled. And the truth is that, save for numbers 1 and 2, almost nothing else actually is recycled. Many of them are technically possible to be recycled, but there aren't facilities to do that kind of recycling because they're either cost prohibitive or other reasons that they're just not being done. And so there's a lot of smoke and mirrors out there purposely being done to sort of put out the message that, all this stuff is recyclable. You just have to do it, you, the consumer. And the reality is we can try as hard as we want to, and most of that stuff never even makes it towards the next step. And as Aidan said, oftentimes, if it does, it's degraded, and oftentimes it still ends up in the oceans, and it still ends up in rivers, and it still ends up in places it shouldn't be, in microplastics and nanoplastics. So, yes, that process could be better, but no, that's not the solution.
What about having X number of companies contribute to a fund that would fund science to make things actually recyclable, not just downcycled, but reusable? Let's say food grade or something that's really useful. What if they contribute again to a fund like that would fund that kind of research?
So that is some part of the Global Plastics Treaty, which is still in negotiations now. A large part of that is figuring out sustainable development of future plastic, but there's already so much plastic out there that there's no reason to develop new plastic. And so one of the things we're trying to do is incentivize that development. So the worry is that plastic just isn't chemically sound to do that. There's just no possible way currently to do that. And if we come up with a solution, it's going to be too expensive for the next 20 to 30 years. So we're continue trying to do it, and then we're going to be faced with some other issue down the road, I'm sure, whether that be the emissions to try to properly recycle it or turn it into something new. So that the only solution we have currently is start holding up production, start making sure that production is reduced.
Yeah, it just seems like a tall order. Why not do this? Why assume that it's going to fail?
So on top of this, I think, like plastics has in the history of humanity has been, an amazing advancement, but in terms of like what it's led to environmentally and to our health is really devastating. And I think part of the solution may be going back to before plastics, and really in the grand scheme of things, that was only 70, 80 years ago. Going back to, glass bottles or aluminum cans and focusing on that instead of plastics. I mean, there was a shift in the 70s with Coca-Cola and Pepsi when they shifted towards plastic bottles because it was just more economically sound. And I mean, it's going to cut into profits, but if we look at the cost of what it's doing to the planet, I mean, going back to what we did prior, I think is something that's overlooked and should be focused on. And the more we focus on that, eventually it might become an even better economic alternative to plastic.
Okay. We haven't even talked about the issue of microplastics. I've done a number of interviews on that, and that seems just like plastics times a billion problem. Getting into people, getting into animals. I mean, just getting into the environment. Is it just too terrible to contemplate, or how does the microplastics creation from these plastics interface with the plastics treaty and the work you guys are doing?
Yeah, I think that'll build off of that. So every plastic out there is going to degrade in one way or another. The issue with microplastics is we've kind of just started figuring out that they're around. Like, it wasn't until 15 years ago that we started truly realizing that plastic that we thought was degrading into the environment isn't actually degrading. It's smaller. And one of the things that we found in our research is that it's starting to enter the bloodstream. It's starting to cross the blood-brain barrier. It's found in the placentas of pregnant women. It's found in children that are unborn still. So it's everywhere. And while it is daunting, we're hoping that the Global Plastics Treaty addresses microplastic as part of the whole issue. So microplastic is not separate from the pollution issue. It is a major part of the pollution issue. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. I mean, it's floating up in the air. It's in the water you're currently drinking. It's in blood right now. And as terrible as it sounds, like, as long as we have a strong treaty and we can kind of work together as well as we did in Montreal Protocols 90 to address the ozone issue, we can come up with solutions. Whether that, in our opinion, that is, reducing production of plastic outright until we can really get a handle on what these microplastics are doing. Like, there's just so much to learn still about this product that's just part of every aspect of our life. We can't do anything anymore without touching plastic, yet we don't know how terrible end of life is for these products. So one thing that we want to focus on is that microplastic is plastic pollution. It is not a separate issue at all.
For each piece of plastic that's there can turn into millions and billions and trillions of microplastics. So, getting the bulk out of the system, like, if you do a monthly cleanup on a river, I'm sure it would help. I don't know how much it would help. And if people looked at, the microplastics load once the cleanup's done, throughout the month, maybe it's totally insignificant. I don't know.
No, actually, we met with the researcher out of, I believe it was Norway, and they tested where they pulled out, they regularly did cleanups on this beach, and they measured the amount of microplastic, and it was significant, the amount that regularly doing these cleanups did, how little the microplastics were compared to when the trash was still in the ocean. So yeah, cleanups actually help a lot on the microplastics issue. So it's not as, as important as upstream solutions are, and they are hugely important. Being just a regular part of the community and taking care of your community through cleanups is extremely effective, as we continue to work on these upstream solutions.
Yeah, and Richard, I think, there isn't one solution here and there isn't one path. All these things are important. I think, the cleanups are important for that local area. They're also really important as a way for people to understand the issue and to build education around the issue of the plastics crisis that we're facing. But, the reality is that this is an existential issue, much like the climate issue, in that it is everywhere. There was just some research I'm sure you probably saw where we found microplastics in clouds. It's literally everywhere. There's no place it isn't. Right? It's in the air we breathe. It's in the food we eat. It's in the clothes we wear. It's literally everywhere. And we put together this report called Babies versus Plastics, primarily because we just saw the growing concerns and just pervasive nature of plastics and microplastics in the environment across the board, and how particularly, the vulnerable populations like babies and young children are being affected by it. Because of behaviors like mouthing and crawling and all those things that babies do, their risk is incredibly high. And they're taking in many, many times more microplastics than adults are. That's terrifying. If you look at sort of, and I think Abe can speak to this, but there have been physical audits, human audits, where we're looking at humans of different ages. And unfortunately, the younger you are, the more plastics are in your body. right? And then accumulates over time. I mean, so it's an issue that is going to continue to get worse. And the solutions are multiple. We have to do things locally and grassroots. We have to get people involved in clips. We have to be pushing for things like the treaty. Ultimately, we have to stop producing as much as we're producing. And that's the real solution. And it's a hard one, right? Because, I challenge people every day when I talk about this issue, trying to 5 minutes without touching plastics. Even if you think you just did, you failed because you breathed it in. It's impossible to escape, right? That's a scary thing. And so I think what we're trying to do is raise the issue of yes, plastic pollution is bad and it's unsightly and it causes all kinds of issues, but it's also much, much worse than that because the microplastics are everywhere. And so, I think we really have to think about, and look, we're for every solution potentially that can help with this problem, as long as it's, doesn't cause another environmental issue, of course. But so, if we can get governments incentivizing companies to do the right thing, great. If we can put in legislation that can really start to slow production, great. If we can really think about what are all the alternatives. Michael mentioned going back to things like glass bottles and cans. There are also all kinds of new innovations out there that we can push towards. I think, really what we have to think about is how do we get to the next stage? How do we get to that world where plastics aren't in everything we see, touch, and breathe? And we get to a point where it's not a problem to go 5 minutes without, interacting with plastics or microplastic.
What would be a main material that would replace the use of plastics? What could it be?
We don't know yet. So that's one of the things. I mean, there's plenty of research and development going around on trying to find a solution to these, whether it's some sort of bioplastic. The thing that people are most worried about, though, with those bioplastics is that they might end up being just as bad as the petroleum-based plastic. So it's just something they have to do vigorous testing for, and they're just seems to be a little bit more careful around this new generation of plastics, this new types of materials, rather than what we did with petroleum-based plastic, just releasing it everywhere. So it's just we want there to be development of a new thing, whether that's going back to aluminum and glass like Michael has said, or just coming up with a new material. But we have to make sure that it's not going to have the same environmental and health effect that current plastic. It's difficult.
Yeah, definitely difficult. And I'll add on the consumer side, right? Because we're really talking big picture. And I think, as important as it is taking a look at your own life as an individual and looking around your house and figuring out where, start with single-use plastic. Where can I get rid of single-use plastic? Oftentimes it's just grocery bags and things like that. And you can easily replace that with reusable bags and I recently just bought these mesh, cotton bag for produce. So, I still don't have to just chuck them into my car. I can just put them in that. And actually way better for the fruit. And it's just looking around your home. Where can I do better? What's one thing at a time that I can eliminate in my life to get plastic out of my life? Next thing you know, your habit is to use these alternative products, whether it's wood, glass, aluminum, cotton, instead of using, what's so easy to use, which is just polyester and plastic and things that, quite frankly, are poisoning us. But I think there's a lot you can do as an individual to take that agency in your life.
One problem I've heard is fibers are a huge component of microplastics. They can come from clothes, synthetic fibers. So, I don't think most people know that plastics is so pervasive. A car, most of the whole dashboard, everything in it, they're just everywhere. And again, clothes, I don't even know how. So when I'm sure people have analyzed, what ends up in lakes and streams, what ends up in people's bodies, preferentially, what are the main culprits? Or there's so many different ones that no one still knows. What are probably the worst of the worst in terms of the plastic world?
So I did speak on that a little bit. One of the main culprits we're seeing, like you said, is those microfibers coming off of clothing. We have another initiative trying to prevent fast fashion and going back to either reusing clothes or going out making sure your clothes are just one material, such as cotton, some natural-based materials. But one of the main things they are seeing is that fibers coming off, and it's not just from the clothing, so the same thing that makes up the clothing, also on fishing equipment. So fishing's huge across the world, and a lot of those nets and things are made up of nylon or some other type of synthetic fiber that people don't realize plastic. And once it hits that water, it immediately starts degrading. It's just a massive amount of sunlight, so it immediately starts degrading. Salt water degrades it. Moving around in the water, just shedding all these fibers at the same time. That's one of the largest issues. And then the other issue is just those single-use plastic bags, bottles. I think at the top of the list is those microfibers shedding off of fishing material and clothing. And then the next one is going to have to be those single-use plastics, such as plastic bag, bottle. And then we start diving into the packaging part of things. So 50% of single-use plastic is packaging alone, packaging that, we didn't have 50 years ago, but for some reason we have to wrap everything tightly in the glass seal and you can't go to the grocery store without running into all its plastic. So it's kind of three main culprit and then a crap ton of other stuff that's out there, unfortunately.
I think if you would walk into a grocery store 20 years ago, take a picture, then walk into that same store today, you'd be shocked the difference.
Ridiculous. Like going to a restaurant, they used to just have metal knives and forks. You go get them. Now they have plastic wrapped in plastic. It's stupid. What's the point? I mean, everything is, they force straws on you everywhere. Like, you don't need it.
I mean, you've probably all seen the bananas wrapped in plastic. It comes with its own packaging. I mean, we don't need to be doing these things. And yet, there we are. And it's hard to understand how we got there. I think, you brought up fashion, and it's an incredible amount of waste that comes from fashion. And so much of it, our clothes have actually never even been worn. With some of the big fast fashion companies, their return rates are 40 to 50% of their inventory, and the vast majority of that inventory just gets destroyed. So, all those clothes being made aren't even being worn, and they're just essentially making their way into the ocean. You can do much better. That's a fixable problem, right? If we just got on that, that's a fixable problem. We don't need to be doing that.
One of the other issues with the fast fashion stuff is that, us in the United States or us in the Western world, or what I call it that, aren't really seeing the issue because we take all the waste and we ship it down to the global south. So we're shipping it to Africa or South America. Chile was just, became the dumping ground for fast fashion. We just saw mass burn-offs of piles and piles of unworn T-shirts, sweatshirts there that are primarily made of, petroleum, essentially. So that material that comes from petroleum is just being burned off, just out of sight, out of mind for us, but, really affected the people down in the global south.
I read a book years ago called Cradle to Cradle, and they gave an example of like a furniture company and that designed its furniture specifically to be taken apart later and reused. Is there any possibility with certain products that they'd be high enough value where the company could do a buyback program? You buy a couch and, within 5 years, if you want to trade it in, they'll give you $50 towards another couch. They'll buy it back from you to reuse it. Plastic bottles are still low value, but I don't know, would that work for any manufacturers and would that help?
Absolutely. I think it comes down to the manufacturing, whoever, with a company that makes it, to one, make a high enough quality product for that to happen and for them, for that to be economically feasible and for them to want to do it. We kind of got to the point where as a society, we're just so used to using these products and throwing them away. But I mean, as Tom and Aidan touched upon, like these products are just like they're cheap and it's just straight weight. I think if we looked at our products as, more of an investment instead of just something we use to just use and throw away, invested in trying to, use higher quality product, a lot of these companies, I think there's a huge opportunity to make what you described as essentially the circular economy, opportunity to really step into that, especially as, consumers are becoming more.
So I guess, it's really multifaceted. You have to hit it at every level, continuously ongoing. The manufacturers, the people and their behavior and, cleanups and just, it's very, very tough. Do you feel like the environmental movement is helping what you guys are trying to do, or are they too sensationalist about it, or is it not enough? Like, what do you see as the, there's still, even within the environmental world, there's a lot of voices, speaking out for attention. So is it hard to navigate what you guys want to get done, or is it being drowned out by other voices, or what do you see?
No, I mean, I think we're all working for a common cause. I think plastics is just one of the many issues we're dealing with in the society currently. I don't think any environmentalists are really drowning out the word. I mean, raising awareness is one of the biggest things that we do. So any amount of attention we can bring to this issue is good attention. As long as people just keep mentioning it, we're for it. I mean, there's some people that go a little bit further than we may, but it gets views, it gets people kind of hooked, and then they kind of start going down the rabbit hole the same way that we did, start diving deeper into those issues, start to see that there's things that they can do, whether that's cleanup or signing on to some of the petitions that we do, or just kind of paying more attention to the ways they interact with the world and the things they're assuming. So now I don't think the environmental world is kind of hurting us in any way or hurting us in our goals.
I will add on to that. And I think, as environmentalists and part of the environmental movement, I think it's also important to, one, bring awareness, which we're doing, but also showcase ways to make a difference, invite people to get along or come along with what we're doing. I mean, all the stuff that we talked about is serious stuff. And if we don't tie in that like way to get involved and take action, it can quickly become, for the people reading and hearing about this, of despair, because it is really scary, and it's stuff that's just outside of our control as individuals. So I think as a movement, it's very important as we discuss this stuff to tie in, how everyone can get involved and make a difference to this. So it's not just bad news, bad news, bad news. And there's nothing, this is a serious issue that we're facing, but this is how you can.
Okay, well, very good. What's the best way for people to get involved, to find out about what the important issues are? What's a common resource for people to go to?
Well, I think if they can stop by earthday.org, we have a ton of resources about the issue, a ton of resources about what you can do personally, whether that's, things in your own life, your own home, your own community, or advocating, ways to advocate for change at a government level, the treaty, for instance. And then, organizations within our organization, like the Great Global Cleanup, which Michael runs, and what to get involved in that program. So I think there's we have a lot of resources available to folks, and we also have many, many partners in the space, and we encourage everyone to look to them as well, because I think there are solutions. It's a huge problem, right? And I think for many people, it's such a big problem, you don't want to think about it. We've gotten this far. And I think as humans, it's incredible we can do and how we can innovate towards new directions and new things. And so I think we're optimistic that we're going to find ways to get through this, but we have to be pretty diligent about it. And so encourage everyone, whatever the situation is, whether you've got a little time to put towards this or a lot of time, whether you're an activist or someone who's just, trying to make things better in their own home, all that's great and important and part of the solution. So we encourage everyone to get involved.
All right, well, very good. Well, thank you, all three of you, for coming. I don't know if I envy your work. Thank God you guys are doing it. So thank you, everyone, for coming. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Richard. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.